There are many reasons to make your own canvas rather than buy it. You can't find the dimension, shape, or texture you need. You want better quality materials. You want to save money, especially those large canvases. They are really expensive. Some of them aren't even available, so you have to get them shipped in, and they're really fragile. And it's just more satisfying to do it yourself. I've made my own canvases for all of these reasons. I'm making a series of videos about making canvases out of paper, fabric, and wood panels, as well as when you need to brace your canvases and how to make the highest quality professional canvases at the best price. This first video will cover how to source your materials, how to make your stretcher bars, stretch your fabric, prep it for paint, then talk about how much money you can save. First, you'll need stretcher bars. You can buy pre-cut bars that slide together from an art store. They won't have the best selection, but you can buy anything online that you don't see in the store. They come in different thicknesses and lengths, and you just slot them together. Be sure that you sand the ends before you try and fit them together, otherwise they might not slide all the way in. You're gonna spread glue thinly on the corners and then slot them together and use a hammer to tap them if they don't fit all the way. But also make sure that you use a T-square or a piece of paper, and that'll help make sure that you have 90-degree angles. I had a big beautiful canvas that I didn't realize wasn't quite squared until after the fact. These stretcher bars will be fairly decent quality, but you are going to be paying more for having this work done for you. So if you're looking to save money, this isn't going to be your best option. A lot of the thicker ones that you want for those really professional canvases aren't available in the stores. You would have to buy those online. What I recommend is you go to your local hardware store. Here are a few of the options. Brick molding is going to have a raised edge, which you want for any canvas. You'll notice that those pre-cut bars had that raised edge too. The center part of the canvas isn't going to be touching anything, and so it's going to have a nice spring and you're not going to get any impressions from the back. Brick molding does have a little bit of a flat edge, which can show up in your paintings, but this is a very thick wood. It's sturdy and it doesn't warp, but it is sold typically by the foot, which can get a little pricey. The cheapest option is to buy pine. If you're doing a smaller medium canvas, get a 2x1. If you're doing larger canvases, do 2x2. These are going to come in 8-foot lengths. For this cheaper wood, it can be wet, it can have defects, so you want to check the quality of the wood. Set it on the floor, roll it around, and that'll help you see if there are any curves to it. You can also look down the length of it to check for curves. Look at the wood and see if there are any cracks. Cracks would be a problem. Other imperfections such as knots or bark probably is okay, as long as you have one side that is nice and clean, and you can have that be your outside edge of the canvas. The inside part nobody will see, so it won't matter as long as it's sturdy. Even subtle curves in the wood, once you cut it down and glue everything together, a lot of it straightens out, or just isn't visible. You can get kiln dried pine. It's a little more expensive, but it's really straight, and because it's already dry, it's not going to bend or warp as the wood dries. So these pieces are really nice, but again, you're spending more. Another pretty good choice is redwood. I had to try this once when the other wood just wasn't very good quality. It's also more expensive, but this wood is so light. So if you are having to carry your canvases around a lot, it makes it so much easier to carry them around. And this wood is also typically a little bit straighter, and you can find this in the decking section. So finally, we are going to need some molding to create that raised edge. Something that's like a quarter round or some other type of trim. At least if it has one part that's higher than the rest, it will work. Quarter round is probably some of the cheapest kind that you can get. Some of the trim will be sold by the foot, and some of it will be sold in 8-foot lengths. I like to get the 8-foot length stuff, and I actually get some fake wood, which is made out of PVC, It kind of reminds me of a foam sort of material, but it's really nice and sturdy, and it is the cheapest stuff that I have found. It's flexible and it's light. So make sure you get your stuff home and make sure that you can fit it in your car. My stuff barely fits by folding down my seats and putting it diagonally across the car, but if you need to, you can have employees help you cut down pieces so they can fit. Now it's time to measure. I'm making a 36-inch by 24-inch canvas. I'll need 2 pieces of wood to get all of my measurements because each time I actually cut the wood, I'm going to be losing a little bit. Otherwise, 8 feet would be perfect. I'm measuring 36 inches first, and I'm adding a 1-inch buffer, so I'm also marking at 37 inches. And then I'm adding my 2 feet for the 24 inches and another inch with a buffer. Here I accidentally mark at 5 feet instead of 5'1", so this is going to throw my measurements off a little bit. That was my mistake. So I'm just doing general measurements here so I know where I'm going to nail on my molding. I can't have any nails be anywhere where my saw is going to cut through. So grabbing some nails, making sure that it has the right amount of depth to go through. And by the way, if you turn it a certain way, you might actually get a little bit more or less depth. So remember, you're adding the depth of your molding to the depth of your wood. Wood glue is an optional step here, but I haven't had any problems using just nails. These have stayed on just fine for me. When you are hammering on your molding, you need to make sure that your nails get embedded down enough so that they don't poke through the fabric later. Move in a little bit from the edge, and it may not hurt to use a finishing nail so it doesn't have a lot of the top part that could stick out. Hammer on the molding and be sure not to damage the top. And once this is done, I do it for the other piece. This nail angled in, and so it's poking out the side. I need to pull this out and redo it, otherwise it will poke through my fabric later. To cut your pieces, you can use a miter saw or a miter box. A miter box is a cheaper option. It's only like $15, but you will also need some clamps, preferably 2 clamps to hold it down to the table so that way it doesn't shift around, and 1 clamp to hold the wood onto the box. So that way your wood doesn't shift around. If it moves at all while you're cutting, then you're not going to have a perfectly straight cut. You just fit the saw into the slot that you need and make sure to shift over your wood so that it's at the appropriate mark, and then just cut through. It's slow, but it does get the job done. If you can, borrow a miter saw. It will be much easier to get an exact cut. I set up the saw and I do all of the left sides first. These will have a 45-degree cut angled to the right. I set my angle very carefully because if it's not perfectly at 45 degrees, then I'm not going to have a perfect rectangle later, or I'll have gaps in between where I'm gluing things. I place the blade in the middle of my 1-inch gaps. And remember, my precise measurements are going to come after I've done my first cut, and that way I'll be able to keep everything the same. So I do all 4 left side cuts on my 24-inch pieces and my 36-inch pieces. And then I get ready for my right side cuts. I rotate my saw to the 45-degree mark on the left. I measure out 36 inches and mark it on my wood, and then I create a stop at 36 inches. By having something over here, I don't have to remeasure, and I know my 2 pieces of wood will be exact even if I'm not perfectly on my pencil mark, because the saw is going to remove the thickness of the saw blade each time it cuts. So I'm going to do my 36-inch pieces at the same time. This saw stand is really nice. It can extend and lock and support the wood and also work as my block. Now that I've cut both 36-inch pieces, they look exactly the same, and I can do my 24-inch pieces. I was going to just shift my saw over and use the wall if my stand didn't extend far enough. Now I discovered my mistake, and I have to go with 23.5 inches, but it does get me really close. So my stop is marked at 23.5 inches away, and I cut both of my pieces to be the exact same. Now that I have both sets of bars cut to their same lengths, I will have a perfect rectangle. Take your stretcher bars to a flat space, and you are going to arrange them in a rectangle and open up your clamps to fit your stretcher bars. These clamps are designed to hold things in 90-degree angles, so they're going to give me perfect corners as long as I have everything shifted just right. So I arrange everything first, and then I go one piece at a time and put a thin layer of wood glue on each side that will be touching and set them back in place. Your finger is the best tool for spreading the glue evenly. The glue is going to dry pretty quickly, so I try to make sure I have this all done in about 5 minutes. This is a good time to have someone come and help, so that way the glue doesn't get really tacky and you get things stuck in the wrong way. So once everything is glued, you want to tighten all the clamps, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Adjust if you have any gaps, and once everything is tightly together, then you want to reinforce the corners with nails. I do 2 nails in each corner. On one side of the corner, I put 1 nail towards the top, and on the other side of the corner, I put 1 towards the bottom, so that way the nails won't run into each other. This really does help tighten up the corners. If you're on the floor, the best way to do this is to just put your foot right behind the clamp and then hammer in, and you won't have it move around. I, of course, had some help, just some other hands to help hold the other side still. Then give this a couple of hours to dry completely, preferably before you move on to the fabric part. Once your frame is completely dry, you're going to remove the clamps and measure out your canvas. You're going to need to have extra canvas for every side. So your canvas needs to reach around the back of the stretcher bars where you will staple in place. For this canvas, 5 inches reaches around and still gives me a little bit of extra fabric to grip onto. So I'm using a pencil to mark off 5 inches from each side. And I'm also tracing around the frame so I can easily set it in place and just use scissors to cut through. Once the canvas is cut, use a medium or heavy duty staple gun. Make sure you have the right staples to fit for your particular staple gun. And these don't need to be too long. They will reach into the wood and hold down the fabric really nicely. First, you're just going to use 4 placeholder staples to just hold it in the middle. For the first spot, if you've already placed your staple, pull it back out, yank the canvas with your hands. You can use any sort of pliers that you have, but canvas pliers are wide and are built for this, so they can grab more of the canvas more evenly and pull down. And then you start from the center and pull tight, and then you're squeezing the staple gun. Make sure to press it down against the frame so that way the staple goes in. And then you're going to be adding staples a couple inches apart all the way around. You're going to be starting from that center point and then working your way out to the edges. Once you do one side, flip, and then do the opposite side, a couple staples at a time. I start on the longest sides, and then I flip and do the shorter sides. Make sure that you tug not only down, but a little bit towards the corners. Make sure your staples are parallel to the sides. You don't want them to be perpendicular, otherwise they're not going to hold the canvas as well. It'll be more likely to tear. You will notice that the center is starting to tighten up and the corners are still loose. You can tilt up the canvas, which may help you to pull it down, or you can do what I did, which is to just brace it against my hip. And it's really helpful to have somebody help you with this, especially if you don't have a very strong grip. Leave a couple of inches at the corners. We're going to be folding some hospital corners, which are going to look really nice, and the corners need to happen last. And then you want to be consistent with your corners, so figure out where you want to fold your corners. I always do them on the shorter side. So pull the fabric across the edge and tuck some of it up, and then you're going to roll the fabric through your fingers until you have a line that matches up with the edge of the frame. Once you have that, make sure you pull everything towards the center and staple in place. And repeat that for each of the corners. Scissors or a screwdriver can help get that initial fold in place. By the way, you can do different fabrics. This is 7-ounce cotton duck canvas. It is a medium thickness. More ounces equals a thicker canvas. I've definitely seen 12 ounces out there. It's hard to stretch, but it's really sturdy and it has lots of great texture. You can also stretch burlap for even more texture, or if you want it really smooth, you can stretch linen. Now we need to gesso the canvas. This is going to be another opportunity to make things nice and tight. So make sure your canvas is clean, otherwise this will get embedded in your paint. My first layer is going to be plain white gesso, which is what I have around. Gesso is pretty traditional. Your first layer is going to be a 50-50 ratio of water to paint, and all this extra water is going to soak into the cotton and cause it to shrink and tighten up. If you have a cool image in your fabric that you want to be able to see, you can use any acrylic medium, which will be clear once it dries. Use a nice wide brush to make this process go faster. I like a really smooth brush because I like to be very intentional about my texture. So take your mixture, dump it into the middle, and spread it all over the top. Allow it to soak in nice and evenly. After you've covered the top, then you're going to get around and paint the sides. Make sure you cover up your table. I know the dollar store has some plastic drop cloths that work well. And I am propping this up on some old lids. I've also used disposable cups. You also want to get the back side just around where the staples are. And once you're done with that, flip it back over and check for any missing spots or areas that are thick or anything else that might have gotten embedded in. Then let it dry overnight. This first layer is going to take the longest because of all that water that is soaking in. The next day, lightly sand the surface to take off anything that might be poking up high. If you do a lot of sanding, you do want to wipe it down with a damp cloth because dust can prevent your paint from sticking. So now you're going to paint another layer with just normal paint, not watered down. This time I'm using latex house paint. I almost ran out of paint, so I had to go pick some up, and I got this from Walmart for around $10. And I actually prefer this over the gesso. It's a lot cheaper and it works very much the same way as long as you get the latex house paint. You can't get anything that's oil-based. You're going to cover the top and the sides, and you can repeat this process of painting and sanding as many times as you like. If you repeat it, it's going to help you get a really smooth surface, as well as using a nice smooth brush and also repeating layers going in different directions. For example, one layer could be vertical and then the next layer can be horizontal. If you like a lot of texture, you can apply the paint very thickly and drag objects through or stamp them into it. I like using a comb to add a little bit of extra texture. And that's it. Once your canvas is dry, you're ready to begin turning this into a work of art. If you like this video, please check out our other videos, and it always helps to hit that like button as well. Keep an eye out for the other videos that will be coming soon. I especially like the paper canvas. That's one that you just can't get in stores.